So you didn't leave your apartment all day?
Do you think I left my apartment all day? No, I work from home. This is the curse of the remote worker.
But you were supposed to go to the gym.
That happens every other day. That's a tomorrow problem. As long as I leave the house once every 2 days, we're okay.
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess I was on the unit the entire day from like 7 until 4:30.
So you effectively didn't go anywhere either. You just went to the one place. It's not that different.
Exactly. So I can't... It's not. You're right. I can't judge at all. Should we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it. Episode 2.
Episode 2. I'm Zoe.
I'm Jackie.
And this is Aftermash, the podcast where we talk about what life turned out to be after the middle school playground.
Yeah, after we played that game of MASH when we were kids. Now we're learning what it really is.
Now we're playing the game of life.
It's not what we expected, but that's what we're here to talk about.
I'm taking the lead today. In the episode I've called The One Big Professional Distraction,
Ooh.
which is about the student loan caps introduced by Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. Before we start with this conversation, to avoid making this episode entirely stats heavy, I'm going to lead off with 2 statistics.
Oh, good. I love this. To avoid stats, here are some stats.
Only 2.
Okay,
I've narrowed it down to 2. Student loan debt is the second largest consumer debt behind mortgages.
Oh, wow.
And the second is that price of tuition has increased by 42% over the general cost of goods and services, which is essentially inflation.
So it is inflated 42% higher than everything else inflation.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, those are both crazy numbers. I feel like, especially considering the fact that not everybody goes to college and not everybody who does go to college winds up taking out loans. So that's a huge amount of debt. What do we make of this information?
I'm going to walk you through the cost of becoming a professional, particularly a doctor, because that is what is pertinent to my life. Mm-hmm. But before we go down that journey, I want to go back to 2011, 2012, when you were taking the SAT and logging into the Common App and applying to colleges.
The good old days.
What, as 2 people who each had professional parents, both of them. My parents were both doctors. Your mom was a teacher. Your dad is literally a NASA scientist who grew up in suburbs where college was the given, the North Star, the end-all be-all. What was that decision-making process like for you?
Ooh, so yeah, I was not ready to go to college, and I was quite scared of the process, quite frankly. I was very fortunate that my parents kind of knew what they were doing. They knew how to take me around to the various tours. They had a sense of the types of majors I might be interested in. They kind of spoon-fed it all to me, which, wound up working out for me in the end. But yeah, I was not ready at the time. I did not understand the trade-offs I was choosing between. I didn't understand the value of this degree versus that. I got very lucky. The school that we chose to go to had an engineering program, but I didn't know if I wanted to be an engineer. I wound up pursuing it. And then, now, many years later, I have moved away from engineering, but I think it set a really good foundation for me. So all this to say, yeah, I was 17 and I had no idea what I was doing, and I did it because I was told to do it, but I had no concept of the financial or lifestyle consequences that would have for the rest of my life.
What role did finances play in your decision?
Ooh, yeah. I would say it was a relatively meaningful decision. My parents sat me down and they said, hey, here's how much money we can afford to spend for 4 years for college. And here's how much the colleges are costing for the ones that you're looking at. And so given that, here's the amount that you would need to make up. Then they helped me say, okay, how do you make that up? You can do it by scholarships. You can do it by financial aid. You could do it by working and paying that money into school. I'm eternally grateful for my parents for them having the foresight to make those decisions. I have friends who went to college and wound up taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans and then had a really hard life after graduating because they were so beholden to those loans. My parents, through the guidance of my parents, I wound up choosing the school that we met at, the school that we went to, because I was offered a scholarship, and that was the real differentiator. So I wound up taking out, I think, about maybe $25,000 of loans, not that much. And the rest I covered through the scholarship, through my parents, and then I also paid for a semester out of pocket through working. I'm grateful for where I wound up, and I think my parents guided me well. I did not understand the math they were doing.
As like a fun side tangent, left to your devices, what do you think you would have done?
Oh God, not going to college? I was terrified. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I think in hindsight, not going for a year and taking the gap year and just learning about the world would have been better. And maybe then when I did go to college, I would have had more appetite for a larger, more challenging school. The school we went to was small, liberal arts, very safe and comfortable. And I got a good education. We met each other. We got a lot of good things from it. But yeah, I don't think it challenged me the same way that going to a larger school that might have been further away from home would have, exploring a little bit more about what I wanted to study. I've always said I would have loved to be like an industrial designer or a graphic designer, and that those weren't options at our small school. So had I taken the time to explore and then go to school later, I may have found myself in those positions. It's hard to be funneled into it at an 18-year-old.
Yeah, it's hard to know what you want to do. I also feel as though I was not ready for it, in addition to not knowing what I wanted to do and feeling in hindsight like I didn't take advantage of the education that was provided to us. A gap year would have been incredibly beneficial. I was also dealing with mental health issues, so taking a year or two to get that under control so that it wasn't my primary focus when I was in college would have been a huge benefit for my education and maybe subsequent journey thereafter. For me, the college decision was I knew I wanted to go to a small school. I was easily overwhelmed, and I knew I wanted to be within a 2-hour radius of going home. Yeah, I was such a homebody. Finances were not a consideration for me at all. I did not apply to a single state school. And up front, full disclosure, I have no student loans. My parents were able to shoulder all of that for me. And now, looking back, I went to college. Obviously, I have regrets based on, not being in the right place to take full advantage of it. Even though, as you said, I met you, I met all of our friends. Life turned out just fine. I also didn't know what I wanted to do after college, so I got another degree, which is the biggest regret of my life, and we'll probably get into it. It set me up to get into medical school, I think, and all in all, it was a lot of money on education that I think I could have done better just to be like more financially savvy and to not put so much pressure on my parents. But these are things you don't know necessarily when you're 18. Now, in hindsight, I have a lot of opinions about higher education, and I'm going to take you through the cost of education because that's a huge barrier for anyone even thinking of getting an education at any extent. You know me, we have 2 other friends who are doctors. How much do you think it costs to become a doctor?
I know how much our private undergrad education cost. I think it was, 10 years ago, it was running in the $50,000 to $60,000 a year range. So for the sake of mental math, let's just call that $50,000. It's probably double that by now. Yeah, let's say $200,000 for 4 years of undergrad if you were paying for all of it and didn't have a scholarship. And so then I imagine that med school would be at least another 200,000 because it's 4 years, right? Okay. So yeah, I'm going to say $400,000 total, but that's like very basic math and assuming that it's only $50,000 a year, which I think is probably a bad assumption.
Yeah, that's a really cute assumption, I would say. First, I'm going to take you the financially savvy route. All state tuition. You didn't have to do a master's in between. Like, you knew you wanted to go to medical school. You did the pre-med courses. You took the MCAT in college. You took your applications and you went from senior year of undergrad into your M1 year of medical school, also a state school. So looking at my state, which is Connecticut, an in-state tuition at UConn for the academic year of 2025 to 2026 is $21,904. And then if you were to not live at home, so you paid room and board, that's an additional 20 grand. But because this person is savvy, they're going to live at home. So they're only paying about 22 grand a year for undergrad.
Okay, but they are living at home and having no fun. They didn't get to do the what we did in college and live in a cute little house together with our illegal dog and throw cute little dinner parties.
So at the end of 4 years, it's about 88 grand.
That is a lot of money, but less money than just about every other form of college, so this makes sense.
If they then go to UConn Medical School, which I have personally been impressed with every medical student I've worked with from UConn, the tuition from 2025 to 2026 for a Connecticut resident is $46,928.
Double the price of your undergrad education, but you're still living at home. Okay, I'm following.
Yeah, so we're going to round up for the sake of math. 50 grand a year times 4 years is 200. So they're at around 288 grand for those 8 years.
Wow. And yeah, this is assuming that they have a free roof over their head with their parents.
Correct. And they've made every correct decision ever, and they're so financially savvy. And you know what? They probably even did college in 3 years. They probably didn't waste money on the 4th year, but we're not going to do that. So that's the cheapest, most savvy way to go through medical school. The more expensive route, which is what I took, is private education all the way, and they need a master's in between. So an undergrad college in Connecticut, such as Trinity, has a tuition of $70,360 for this academic year of 2025 to 2026. But when you add on room and board, the bill for 1 year is like 94 grand.
Oh, that's inflated a little bit since we went. That hurts.
So essentially 400 grand for a liberal arts undergrad education.
Oh boy.
And then they didn't know they wanted to become a doctor, so they didn't take all the pre-med requirements. So they had to do a post-bac, which is another like 15 months of a private school master's. And if you went up the street to Tufts, that'll cost you also around 50 grand. So now we're around 450 grand.
And we haven't even started med school yet.
And we haven't even started. And we're not even considering the cost of applications in this process, which is a lot, by the way.
I'm so grateful people want to be doctors. I'm so glad I didn't want to be a doctor. Wow.
And then let's say they went to a private school for medical school in Connecticut. So that's Yale or Quinnipiac. The tuition is for $72,290 as well. Typically, they're paying about 110, 120 grand per year to be there. So let's say it's 110, that's 440 to 480 grand for medical school, plus the 50 grand, plus the 400 grand. So you're at like 900 grand.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of money. That's a little bit more than my cute little 400 grand estimate. 200 grand estimate? What did I say? Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Do you know how people pay for medical school? Do you have any sense?
Feet pics.
Maybe our savvy person who did undergrad in 3 years.
Yeah, they're feet famous.
Yeah, they use their parents' basement. They have like a dark room. Yeah, nothing sketchy is going on. So they either have rich parents, they take out student loans, or they join the army, for which they do get medical school paid for, and they get a stipend. So they are being paid to go to medical school, but then they owe the army time after. So it's more limiting. Like, nothing's for free here. The One Big Beautiful Bill has changed student loans. Prior, briefly, parents could take out as much money to cover the cost of a dependent's undergraduate education. Students could get subsidized or unsubsidized loans for undergraduate education. And in pursuing any graduate degree, they could take out the entire cost of tuition. Now, what do you know about the One Big Beautiful Bill?
I've heard the name, and I've heard a lot of people are angry about it for a bunch of reasons. I'm not sure what I know in particular about education costs as a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Okay. So this is the legislation that Trump signed that outlines Trump's tax and spending policies, and it was signed into law on July 4th of 2025. And as you said, it affects a lot of things. It affects healthcare stipends, and it affected student loan caps. So undergraduate loan caps are not touched. The existing undergraduate loan limit is $57,500.
Before we continue, we said our savvy person who was going to the cheap school and living at home and didn't get any parent paying for it, they were still doing twice that.
About 80 grand.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then our unsavvy person who needed to put, $300,000 or $400,000, who needed to pay for $300,000 or $400,000 because they went to a private school. Like, they still are not having all of that covered for their undergrad.
Correct.
Okay.
Especially because their parents now can't take out the full cost of the loan. Their parents are also capped per dependent.
Okay. I imagine you'll be getting into what they do instead, but just flagging that I'm noting that sounds like the math is already not mathing before we even get to the changes you're about to tell us.
Yes. And then specifically when it comes to postgraduate degrees, they have said some degrees are professional, in quotes, and other degrees are not professional.
Was that previously a distinction that existed?
No.
Okay.
So for a non-professional, there is a lifetime borrowing limit of $100,000 from the federal government. This is all regarding federal government loans.
Okay. And so if this person wants to go to grad school, or
if they want to get like an MFA, a social work degree, a nursing degree, they only have $100,000 from the federal government to do it, plus the $57,500 for undergrad. So they have $158,000 lifetime limit.
Okay, that does not sound like a ton.
And then for graduate professional degrees, they get a little more. So they get $200,000 lifetime borrowing limit for the professional degree, plus the undergraduate $57,500. So they have a lifetime loan limit from the federal government of $257,500.
So yeah, I'm hearing that this is substantially more money than the non-professional degree, but it still sounds like it is significantly less than all of the costs that we were discussing earlier. So this is a really big change. Yeah, these people were able to take out $1 million of loans previously and are now being capped at a quarter of that.
And when I was talking about how do people pay back loans, I forgot to mention public service repayment, which means you work at a not-for-profit hospital in a health desert location, and after paying back your loans for 10 years, the rest is forgiven. I think that's how it works.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense with what I remember.
And so the next rational question would be, what operationally is a professional degree? So the criteria is generally unclear. It signifies both the completion of the academic requirements for beginning practice in a given profession at a level of professional skill beyond that normally required for a bachelor's degree, and professional licensure is generally required.
Okay. So without hearing you describe the list, I'm thinking lawyers, doctors.
Yes. Lawyers and doctors, pharmacists, dentists, veterinarians, chiropractors, which I'll hold my tongue, optometry, podiatry, and theology.
Interesting. Okay. So we think theologists are more professional than nurses. Okay. I'm curious how they came up with this list and why they think some of these deserve more money than others. But yeah, it sounds like everybody across the board is still getting a really big reduction in the amount of lifetime loans that they'll get from the government. And I imagine that degrees in the professional bucket and the non-professional bucket both currently cost more than that limit.
Correct. I didn't look up the cost of becoming a physical therapist or becoming a nurse, but given the trend, that's a safe assumption. So as we said earlier, the cost of education could be anywhere from $300,000 to $900,000, given individual savviness, foresight, and hustle and grind, we'll say. When I was looking up stats for this, I saw that the average amount of student loan debt for a physician is $250,000. And I said, okay, maybe Trump and his cronies did some math here. And I was talking to my friend who did take out student loans for medical school. And I was on Reddit, which I have relied on more frequently in my older age.
Surprisingly, one of the best bastions of the internet remaining. It's pretty nuts.
Exactly. And so when you take me, the student who didn't have any student loans next to my friend who had to take out $100,000 each year of medical school, not including any of her undergrad debt or the master's debt that she accrued. I had $0. She had $400,000. That's where you get the 250 average. And that's why stats are to be investigated thoroughly.
Yeah. Because even if we think about it without having that personal anecdote, if 250 is the average, that means that 50% of people have more than that. Unless everybody is exactly 250, but I highly doubt that.
And my impression is that the people who had to take out loans had to take out loans. So they're bearing the brunt.
Yeah, no one's sitting here being like, I can afford 90K of my 100K a year. I just need a little dollop on top. Are there scholarships for med school? Probably not that much because it's so competitive, right?
I think a few schools give scholarships. I don't think it's the norm. My school certainly wasn't handing out scholarships. But in our case study in the state of Connecticut, Yale does hand out scholarships.
Oh, interesting. Okay, but yeah, either way, it sounds like there aren't that many options. This person is not going to be able to be working a meaningful amount while they're in med school. If you're going to med school, you're going to med school, which means that your livelihood has to be paid for by loans or money that you've already made or family or friends. Yeah, that sounds hard, and it sounds like there's a lot of people who need a lot more money than $250,000 or whatever you told me the cap was.
Yes, and this brings us to why I want to talk about this, because the discourse I was seeing on the internet as a very not online person, it just like seeped in the margins of my feed, was everyone was perseverating on this idea that they are no longer professionals, which I am willing to bet before this arbitrary definition came out, they were not waking up in the morning and saying, oh boy, I'm a professional. I get to go to work and work my professional job. Discourse I was seeing was that they're harping on how nurses are no longer professionals, yada, yada. This is targeting women-dominating fields. This is dominating fields with mandatory reporters, so individuals who have to report suspected abuse and neglect to minors and elders. This is, quote, the dumbest decision ever, extremely insulting, quote, likely will impact staffing, it's a slap in the face. And what I have to say about that is we already had burnout in healthcare since COVID, famously, but probably before. We already have staffing shortages, nurses, doctors, primary care doctors, anyone working in the hospital, we don't have enough of them. I think mandatory reporters is a bit bait clicky, in my opinion. It's a bit conspiratorial.
Yeah, because as a doctor, you're also a mandatory reporter too, right?
Yes, I am. All in all, I think professional is not what you should be focusing on. I think staffing shortages and burnout already existed. I think some of this is just clickbait. Woman-dominated fields, I think, might be a bit of a stretch, but that is the argument I would be most swayed by, I think.
I read an interesting book recently, and I do not remember what it is, but I will remember by the time we put the show notes out, and I will mention it, that was talking about how fields that are women-dominated get paid less because they have high percentage of women, not the other way around. It's not that women happen to choose the low-paying fields, and so when a field switched from being women-dominated to being male-dominated, the pay increased because the perceived prestige went up. So I could see there being some truth to the fact that we are being judicious with only calling professionals the fields that are more male-dominated than the female-dominated ones. But I think, to your point, even if that is the case, the bigger change is that now students who need access to a lot of aid are not going to have access to it anymore. Regardless of if they're a professional or not, they will not be able to cover all of their loan needs if they were trying to pay for their schooling out of loans exclusively.
Yeah. So that's like my biggest gripe with the One Big Beautiful Bill is that we have already had a decline in state funding, which has already made tuition so much more expensive. As I said at the top of the episode, it's outpaced inflation by 42%. And we've already have inequities in pursuing higher education. When you look at the median income of attending a 4-year public university, in 2017, it was 22% of a family's income for undergrad. But the inequity there was that it was 19% for white families, non-Hispanic families, versus 35% for Black and Hispanic families. This is in Connecticut specifically. In the show notes, there's CPBB, the Centers on Policy and Budgeting, I think, and they break it down per every state. So you can have a lot of fun poking around on that website. But like I said, I want to keep this stat light.
Okay, yeah. So what you're saying is the burden on white families is less than the burden on non-white families, statistically speaking. And so the people who are going to be the most impacted by the inability to take out the full amount in loans is disproportionately going to be minorities.
Yes. And it's not just that, like, now you have to take out loans. It's that maybe they don't qualify to take out loans, at least federal loans. You need a good credit score. You need someone to co-sign. And so either you can't take out loans or you're shunted to private sources of loans, which are infamously more predatory with worse interest rates.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, where do people go who want to go to school and can no longer get the loans? It's private loans, that's where they go?
Yeah. Or they join the army.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, neither of those seem like ideal options.
Correct. Before we get into like surmising about how much tuition should be and like could be, can you just like summarize what I've taught you so far? The journey I've taken you on.
It's been quite a journey. Let's see. We started by discussing how college has gotten more expensive. All higher education has gotten more expensive, and that increase has outpaced inflation over the last decade. And then you talked about...
I actually think it's since 1975, just to be like super accurate.
Yeah, okay. The cost of college has been raising faster than inflation, and it has been doing so for a long time. We talked about how even the most savvy person who is trying to go to medical school, if they had no financial aid in the form of scholarships or support from family, they would have to be taking out, I think it was $22,000 a year for undergrad and then $45,000 a year for med school in loans, which adds up to, can I do this math right now? 20, 40, 60, 80, like $90,000 for undergrad, which is already nearly double the limit that they're allowed to take out. And so we're in a situation where people cannot afford college and higher education unless they have private access to finances or go the route of the private loans or joining the army. And when we're focusing on if a degree, higher education is professional or not, there may or may not be some merit in that, but that is not really the point of the bill, or it's not really the brunt of the impact of the bill. And at the end of the day, it's about the fact that we are now reducing access to high quality loans to the people who need it most, which will disproportionately be our minorities who want to go to school and do not have access to family wealth to pull from.
Exactly. And like, to be super clear, that's a problem because they don't need more white girls who are like suffering through a Spanish conversation to be doctors. Like, I have my own personal history that informs how I practice medicine, and I am like willing to learn whatever I need to learn to be culturally sensitive and sensitive to the patient in front of me, but I'm not Native American. I'm not Hispanic. I didn't grow up under the poverty line.
So we would benefit extra by having more people who represent the populations that they're serving be the doctors who are serving those populations. And that would go probably a long way towards the inequities that we're experiencing in the medical system right now.
And also, like, that's the American dream, right? To be able to move up and create more wealth than your parents had, and everyone deserves that opportunity. So we've been told. If we're looking at how much tuition could be, we could look in two places. The first place would be Purdue University in Indiana, and the second place would be the UK.
Okay. And so this is what could colleges choose to charge us if they weren't raising their prices higher than inflation every year?
Correct. And this is focusing on undergrad. So they have frozen their tuition prices since 2012 for residents of Indiana. And they subsidize these costs through other revenue streams, such as state funding, grants and contracts, private gifts, aka they tap into that endowment, housing, dining, athletics, campus services. They also acquired Kaplan University, which is one of those like online for-profit universities that you see advertised to you on the television. They have commercialized research and partnerships, which includes management of intellectual property, auxiliary enterprises, and the F45 gym that operates out of their athletic center.
That's cool. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of different streams of income. So Purdue University is really leaning into the fact that they're a business and finding different ways to make money so that they're not putting the burden on the in-state students.
And to be honest, and I haven't looked into this, but I feel like this isn't too far off from most universities.
They are all businesses, whether they're admitting it or not.
They're all businesses. If they're charging less in tuition, maybe they're charging more in board and food. Our college is gentrifying the town upon which it sits for real estate income. Some colleges and universities have sites in like the UAE and in China. I don't know that the difference is necessarily that they have all these revenue streams. It's just what they're choosing to do for it. So in Indiana, at Purdue University, the base undergraduate tuition and fees for an Indiana resident is about $10,000. And then also funding it is non-residents and international students.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then this person who is an Indiana resident who's going to Purdue is paying half for their in-state tuition compared to the Connecticut student that we talked about earlier. That's insane.
And then when you look at all of the universities in Indiana, in general, from the year of 2000 to 2018, there's been a 16.1% increase in tuition.
Yeah, so Indiana has not raised their prices in the time that all of the other schools around it are raising their prices. What did you say it was? 16%? 6D?
Correct. 16, 1-6.
1-6.
Oh, God. 1-6.
I was hoping it wasn't 60, but you never know. Yeah, so...
If I really wanted to prove a point.
Yeah, so in the time that the other universities are averaging an increase of 16%, and as we talked about earlier, stats can be misleading. That doesn't mean that all of them are raising it by 16%. It probably means that most of them are raising it by more than 16%, and it's being weighed down by the Purdue universities of the world that are not raising it. And so, yeah, we have one school that did not feel the need or was able to not raise their prices at the same time that 16% is higher than inflation.
And then there's also the UK, which is famously more socialist than we are. They charge a similar price when you account for the different currency as Purdue does. According to Ivywise, the government sets a max tuition for the cost of domestic students. In 2025, that number was about 10,000 euros or 11,728 US dollars. And from 2017 to 2024, the UK was able to freeze tuition around 9,000 euros as well.
That's also low. Yeah.
Yeah. And then these students also get education, scholarship, and cost of living stipends.
Oh, they get stipends too? Wow.
So now we have to look at what factors increase tuition. There's an increase in demand. There has been an increase in applicants to undergraduate institutions from 2024 to 2025 to 2025 to 2026. There was a 5.3% increase in applicants.
So we have more people wanting to go to college than previously.
So basic economics. There's also been a decline in state funding. In 1980, states provided nearly 80% of funding for higher education. Now it's below 50%. So that burden is on the students. There's also the hope that professors are getting paid more than the cost of inflation. I didn't dig into this, but professors sound off. There's the keeping up with the Joneses, overhead charges. People are putting in lazy rivers. Medical schools have to put in simulation centers where you can learn how to be a doctor on very high-tech dummies and in very elaborate anatomy labs that are more than just a cadaver.
Yeah, so it's an arms race where the colleges are trying to to outbid each other for your student to go there.
Nothing is free. It just might be free at the point of service. So like in medical school, some schools give their students an iPad or a laptop. And it's not that it's free. It's just that like it's crowdfunded in your tuition.
Yeah, that lazy river, not free.
Not free. And then there's the Bennett hypothesis, which basically says because schools are guaranteed to get federal funding, they can charge more.
I bet that is the big talking point for why capping the loans is important.
Yes. However, when economists look into this, the research on whether the hypothesis actually dictates tuition is mixed. However, there was a paper in 2014, and they looked at for-profit higher education across 5 states from the years 2010 to 2014. And they compared schools that were eligible for federal loans to schools that weren't eligible to student loans from the government. And they found that the schools that were eligible for student loans were 78% more expensive than the not eligible schools. So they could charge more. And that even held up when you looked at a school that was receiving federal loans, when you compared their programs that are eligible for the loans versus those that aren't eligible for the loans. So the programs where students couldn't take out federal loans to subsidize it, that tuition was similar to an institution that didn't receive federal funding at all.
That does sound like it backs up the Bennett hypothesis then, at least in part. So where do we go from here? What do we do with this information?
I have no idea. It's too soon to tell, truly. Like, the law was passed in 2024, and these federal funding limitations don't start until the entering class of what will it be, 2030. So 2026 to 2027 is the first academic year. There are some people who project that it could decrease up to about $15,000, which is something, but we're talking about $300,000 to $900,000. It's honestly kind of minimal. And we can anticipate that institutional loans might become more prevalent. They might have to start tapping into the endowments that they're sitting on, and they're always getting shit about sitting on the cost of a small African country's GDP. So maybe that would be a good thing. We'll have to check back in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is we think this may have positive impact on the cost of college, helping it go down, which hopefully would reduce the debt burden that students would be in. But in the meantime, anybody, like, the cost hasn't come down yet, and their ability to take out the high quality loans has been diminished. And so in the meantime, people will be pushed more towards more predatory forms of loan. And you said the analysis was saying maybe $15,000 reduction. Like, we're not even sure that this will fully decrease the cost enough that it would outweigh the harm on our minority populations who are trying to go to school. So yeah, this sounds very mixed. We'll have to keep an eye out there and see what happens.
So what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self? It sounds like you're holding fast to not becoming a doctor.
Not becoming a doctor. Definitely not. Yeah. I'm actually going to back up a little bit. If I were my 17-year-old self, I would definitely give the advice, take a gap year. I think it's going to be really scary, but it would be worth it. I think I would have gone to college in a much more intentional manner, and I would have known what I wanted to get out of it or not wanted to get out of it if I had spent some time learning more about the world and understanding the value of my dollar. So that is definitely the biggest piece of information that I'm taking away from this whole conversation. I think I wound up making good choices and it led me to a good place, but I think I could have made choices that had been more intentional from the start. I think another takeaway that I'm taking from this is that these situations are complex and economics is not straightforward, and well-meaning interventions to change paradigms will probably have impacts that are both good and bad. And unfortunately, I think this is something that I've been noticing a lot in life in general. the bad impacts often get disproportionately concentrated on the people who most need the good impacts, at least in the short to medium term, from this sort of belt tightening type change. I'm going to think about how to turn that into advice to my 20-year-old self.
A cautionary tale, perhaps.
Yeah. I think my advice is to think through the second and third order impacts of changes and don't just fall for the clickbait headline that tells me that not being a professional is the thing that I should be caring about, because there's actually all this other complicated financing of education, how many people get to be doctors, etc., that, to your point, feels much more compelling. So don't fall for the headlines and don't be afraid to click into things more layers than you think you need to in order to really understand the nuances.
Solid.
What advice would you have? You're the one doing this research. I bet you've been thinking a lot about what the decisions are that your 20-year-old self made.
It took me a very long time to understand that higher education was an investment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say that I'm like frivolous with money in like a day-to-day way, but I don't think I had the bigger picture in mind. Like you, I wish I took a gap year or two to focus on my mental health, to be in a position to maybe challenge myself more, go to a bigger school. Perhaps there was a time I was thinking of applying to Trinity College in Ireland, perhaps doing that, doing something that would have really excited me and challenged me, because I did not take advantage of that. So I think just a general understanding of privilege and that education is an investment.
That's a really good reframe. Yeah, I think especially to the 18-year-old selves that we were when we were going to college, it was just the assumed next step. So it didn't even occur to us to wonder why, or like we generally knew that college was, a leg up and the ability to open more doors in the future. But yeah, to understand what those doors are, why you want them to be open, what happens if you don't open them, having a better understanding of all of those things going in will make you appreciate the doors that you're getting and choose to invest in the education in order to reap the benefits, not just because it's what you're told to do.
Yeah. That's where we leave it.
Thank you, Zoe. You took us on a long journey. This has been great. I feel like I understand a lot more about the nuances of the higher education space now, and I'm definitely going to be watching the headlines over the next few years to see what the cost of higher education does.
Let's see how I change your algorithm.
You are definitely going to change my algorithm. This is going to be great.
It's going to be that and Hannah Montana 20th anniversary ads.
Zoe's just trying to get me to turn into her. It's okay.
Thanks for listening. Now it's time for the obligatory sign-off, except for the part where we thank our amazing producer and editor, Jay.
Jay, we could not have done this without you. But also, listeners, we couldn't have done it without you either. So please like and subscribe. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps.
And all of your favorite social medias at AfterMashPod.
And your least favorite social medias too, for the record. And if there are any topics you would like us to cover, leave us a comment, slide into our DMs.
And until next time, this is Life After MASH.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.